Good afternoon. Today is January 21st, 2014. Welcome to the televised portion of our monthly work session. On deck first, that's a new one, Frank, is Dr. Todd Bowden, who will be discussing with us career and technical education and update on what's happening in that exciting area. Thanks, Todd.
After all, it is a quite timely topic.
Yes.
Actually, I think we're very well timed to follow up with Friday's Convocation of Governments, in which we had two agenda topics, both pertain to workforce development. Let me first orient you to the packets that I've left for you. There's a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. There's also a couple references for you. We'll talk from a district perspective about what sectors are being served at what levels from middle, high school, and adult. But if you have an interest in where the specific schools that individual programs are located, there's a grid in your folders that include that for both our high schools and our middle schools. And then specifically to our high schools, it shows the career pathways that we always are emphasizing to our students, that it's not a course in career and technical education, but a sequence of courses. So you also have that for your references that show the career pathways located at each of our high schools. The last item that you have in front of you is a brochure that includes all of our career clusters and contact information. I encourage you to share this information with your constituents if they want to get involved. And on the back page, there is replicas of my business card, Mr. Ron DePillo, our Assistant Director for Career and Technical Education, and our two specialists so that you can make referrals to those individuals. So if we could start in on the presentation itself. I've organized it such a, yes.
Excuse me, Dr. Bowden, before we begin, the grid and the career pathways, are these on your website? Because these are excellent. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the organization of the presentation today is, I want to give you just an overview of the work that we're doing in career and technical education. We'll highlight the sectors being served, talk about some next steps or some opportunities. And certainly no conversation would be complete without discussing an opportunity, I think, before us down in Northport, as well as some very interesting things that are going on in Tallahassee. These were items that were discussed on Friday, but my hope is that we could generate some conversation around those, make sure that we have all the questions answered and receive some direction from you on next steps and how we pursue those objectives. So career and technical education. Just an overall snapshot. You can see the programs that we are serving. We have 38 programs in our high schools and middle schools. We have 42 programs offered in 7 high schools and 9 middle schools. And we have 108 instructors in our district. By the numbers, you can see the number of students being served. Just shy of 5,000 students being served in our high schools, about 3,500 in our middle schools. Our adult program population, and we've separated those out into our PSAV, which is our career preparation programs, and our adult general education. And those are the students that are completing their high school diploma, attempting to master the English language, or working on a GED. So you'll see that they number about 3 to 1, those that are in career preparation. So one of our opportunities is to make sure that we celebrate the success of those students as they earn high school diplomas and GEDs, but also convince them to stick around a while longer and obtain a marketable skill so that they can enter the workforce at above a basic level.
I don't know if you'll be talking about GED later, but I have one question. I know that the requirements have changed as of the beginning of this year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Could you just talk about that a little?
Certainly. First of the year, we reset GED scores. And so we spent the last year with a public push. You hear some mass media advertising, is that in the past there were sub-tests of the GED, and you could bank those scores. And so when you came back, if you'd mastered reading, you were no longer required to take that. On January 1st, we went to an automated testing system, and it necessitated a reset of all those scores. So if you had banked passing scores in 2 of the 3 areas and didn't get that third by the end of the year, you find yourself starting from scratch here at the beginning of the year. So there's a process now that we're educating our students that maybe we had lost contact and are coming back now and thinking that they're this close to getting their GED. Hopefully they've retained that mastery and can demonstrate it on a new computerized version of the test, but the standards have also changed to reflect how the bar has moved for our existing high school students. So the GED is ever evolving. At the state level, just to make you aware, there is some conversation about what the state of Florida's commitment to the GED is. There's more than one way to master the content of a high school education, and GED is proprietary. And so our state has elected for a statewide diploma to use the GED as the mechanism, but that may not be the case going forward. There are other states who have left the GED and have developed in-house mechanisms or gone to different third party. So the GED may not always be the standard in the state of Florida. So that's certainly something that we're monitoring.
Just a quick question, though, because the GED is proprietary
Yes.
and it's self-paced, so therefore it really doesn't lend itself to teach those GED knowledge and skills in career technical environments. I mean, so, we talk about teaching reading in the content area, so how can we look at teaching those GED knowledge and skills in the technical career environment? And that really feeds into what you said, how we can keep those students.
Yes. Yep. It's really a lockstep process, in that when a student comes to our institution the first time, we really start is where are they with their English? And so if you have a student that doesn't completely master the English language, we start with an ESOL class. Then you progress from there into basic academic preparation. And so we'll do an assessment of a transcript. If you're close to earning a high school diploma, we'll steer you in that direction. If you feel like that's would be a better route to go with the GED, we go directly to the GED, and then the career preparation is that final step to prepare you for the workforce. But we absolutely consider a basic high school diploma, whether earned in a traditional way or through a GED program, as the first step to employability. Get the presentation back. Continuing with the numbers, you look at the number of high school students who complete a career pathway. And so one of the handouts that you received is the sequence of courses, is that we want to push in our high schools participation in career and technical education, but there's a difference between taking 3 independent courses in 3 different disciplines and the level of mastery that you would gain by taking a 3-course sequence. And so the charts that you have in front of you by school we've made available and should be posted in all of our guidance offices, so that as we're advising students, that we're not just saying that we want to make sure you're participating in career and technical education, but that you're going in depth so that you have a marketable skill at graduation. And so during the 12-13 school year, 1,042 students graduated from our comprehensive high schools, having completed a minimum of a 3-course sequence in career and technical education. So that's a number we want to continue to watch. Those students earning industry certification, also a very important fundamental to entering the workforce. We have 845 of those, and then 281 on the students earning ready-to-work credentials. LCPs are learning completion points. We track the progress of our adult education students through LCPs, which basically means when a student comes into our institution for the first time, we assess them on their reading and math skills, and we assign to them a numeric value on a scale of 1 to 12. And so a student may come in and be an 8 in reading and a 9 in math, and then as they progress through their studies, we continually are retesting them, and they progress up those benchmarks. And so a student that reads at the 9th grade level, we progress up to the 10th, 11th, 12th, and then that signifies that they're ready to go and take the GED. We claim those progressions through the workforce development system, so we track that. Many times People get fixated on graduation, that a student may come to us at the 3rd or 4th grade reading level and leave us at the 8th or 9th grade. They are not a dropout. They progressed significantly. And many of our job preparation programs are graded out with a 9th and 10th grade reading level that they don't need complete mastery. So we do track those intermediate steps, and those are the LCPs. Occupational completion points is, if you think of a career ladder, that there are interim job titles in which, as you progress through an occupation, and so if you think specifically in the area of auto tech, that there is a master level in which you become an ASE certified mechanic, but there are interim skills in which make you employability. So once you master air conditioning, you could spend an entire career working on air conditioning. There are those that are just oil techs. And so the interim occupations that our students gain prior to graduation, each one of those we track because it's their progression up a career ladder in their given area.
Well, one additional question, if I may, going back to career pathways, how do our students, how do they know what career pathway? And I ask that, so having changed majors from bachelor's to master's, so, I took different types of classes, and that gave me an inclination of where I might want to go. So if our high school students, if they're taking 3 in one cluster, how do we know that maybe they take one and then if they took 3 classes in 3 different clusters, it may broaden their experiences?
Well, I consider an acceptable outcome is when a student comes to a conclusion that there's an occupation they don't want to do. There's such a wide array of different occupations that sometimes you have to try culinary arts and you have to determine, I don't know what it is that I want to be, but it's not in the area of culinary arts. Well, that puts us one step closer to finding that occupation for that student. So sometimes it's process of elimination, and students do move from program to program, but as long as they are taking a good hard look at the future employment prospects and making decisions about their future, we consider that a win. Now, if they're just taking a class because they like this teacher or they want to do a little cooking or they want to do that, but if they've examined an occupation, had a true interest in it, and then decided that's not what they wanted to do, that's a win, and we move on to the next and hope that we hit a home run the next time.
Okay, thank you.
I would also think that, as they go through their life and they may be changing careers, they might fall back on one of those as an interim to get from here to there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The state of Florida organizes the world of work into 17 different career clusters. Easy for me to say. If you were to take any job title, it would fall into these 17 broad clusters. And so we have a tremendous resource that's made available to us from the Department of Education in which we can research different occupations. And so if someone comes to us and says, what are you doing in the area of manufacturing? And we want to do research on that. We can go to the website and kind of drill down through different occupations. It also gives us the ability to assess our programs to make sure that we're serving a wide range of employers. One of the things that you'll notice that is missing, and many people talk about the STEM careers, that's science, technology, engineering, and math. Well, that's not a career cluster. STEM is a skill set that is found in many different careers. And so as we look at different programs, you will find that some are marked as a STEM career because they apply science, technology, engineering, and math, but that's not a cluster unto itself. So here in Sarasota County, of the 17 clusters, we're serving 14 different career clusters. And so that's something that we're constantly assessing. There's much crossover. My pet peeve is the area of finance. There are things under business management and administration that I would say falls firmly in the area of finance, but that's not the way they're organized from the Department of Education. As an example, we train bookkeepers at SCTI, and they're under the area of management and administration, not in the area of finance.
Why do we not have those 3 clusters?
Just based on demand and our ability to provide. One of the ones is energy, and it's evolving. I would make an argument that through our electrical program and our electrical apprenticeship that we're serving that sector, but some of it is the way they're classified.
What would be under finance? the way the state classifies finance?
Typically, it's the accounting, the loan officer, some of those different career titles. There are times where you have a difficulty understanding how they're classified. I'll use electrician as one of them. Electrician falls under architecture and construction, not under energy, as an example.
I would think that finance would be something that might work in our community with all of our banks and whatnot, or it's just not neat.
If you look specifically at the finance sector, there's
Or I
the
guess
three,
more to college.
yeah, the 3 tiers of education. We really coalesce around the idea of 1 year of technical training and less. And so, as an example, we have a financial institution right on the campus of SCTI, but they're working with customer service technicians, they're working with our bookkeeping students, they're working with our administrative specialists. If you wanted to be a loan officer with Achieva, they would require an associate's degree. So many of those occupations would be found at the state college or university level.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And that's one of the things that when we look at different job titles that the state does is it assigns it to different levels of institution. Okay. So what I wanted to do is just go through the different clusters as opposed to reading those for you, just to graphically illustrate where the programs are found. You have all of these slides in your packet as well as the cross-reference grid. So as we just go through there, you can see that in some clusters we have rather intensive offerings. Others, it's minimal. Okay. Business management and administration, one of our largest clusters.
When we talk landscaping and we talk the potential, say, at SCTI,
Yes.
Once we put the athletic fields in for Riverview, will that offer us some opportunities to train, as we had discussed a long time ago, train people so that they can do grounds maintenance for athletic fields?
Absolutely.
Because that's a big career in the state of Florida. There's a lot of jobs in that arena.
One of the things you have to do in an economy our size is seek out commonalities. It's one of the things that we did successfully in manufacturing is find a common skill set. When you talk about landscape management and turf management, it's another opportunity that there's distinct groups that probably don't stand alone for an individual program. So you talk about the nursery growers, the maintenance folks, the growers, is that there's a common skill set for those programs. And so what we want to do is define the commonality so that we can serve all of those. And so we're having conversations everywhere from Robert Albritton about what it takes for growers to our Golf Course Superintendents Association, and even having some conversation about minor league and spring training baseball. But specifically, the baseball and softball fields, which are under construction at SCTI, we're going to turn those into a land lab because those are different grasses and require different techniques than lawns of other types. And so we've had conversation with Jody Dumas, our Director of Facilities, in regards to how our students can gain experience in maintaining those fields and take a little bit of the burden off of his department. But in that particular area, we've also had conversations about our students interning with his different zones and getting opportunities to work in the field and to be on the truck and understand what those jobs are like. Hopefully with the idea that we could hire some of our own here in the district, but also to provide that work experience so that when they graduate, everybody wants an experienced employee. It's one of the things I think there's a tremendous opportunity with the school district. I say it over and over again. We are the largest employer in Sarasota County, and we employ bookkeepers and landscape techs and auto mechanics and secretaries and bookkeepers, and I think there's a real opportunity to provide our high school and adult students with work experience in all of our different district functions. You'll notice the footnote as we go through that those areas within the career clusters are marked if they meet the state definition of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So you see some footnotes as we go through. Health science, another large offering. Yes, ma'am.
The previous one, education and training for the early childhood education, do you coordinate with our schools and the instruction to make sure that when they are graduating, do you have a pre-K program there too?
We do.
So that when they leave, they've got the skills that we expect coming in or into kindergarten so that they mesh?
Yes, there's a great organization. Our Early Learning Childhood Coalition is really the pipeline to all of those pre-K institutions, and we're a leader in that organization. And we do not only follow the curriculum for those pre-K students, but we do the assessment of all the other pre-K centers is one of the things that we do. That for licensure, we go out and do observations, and so a member of our staff does that under contract.
Great.
A question for the superintendent. I'm sure the answer is yes, but for my peace of mind, we have policies in place regarding students and internships and liability. And perfect. Thank you.
We're talking about health science, major area of employment here in Sarasota County, and you'll see that our programs respond to that need. Hospitality and tourism, certainly here in sunny Sarasota.
One remark on the health sciences. I'm always one behind there. On the health sciences, we offer some of the same courses they do at the State College of Florida, don't we? But aren't they a lot more reasonable? And what are the cost differences? I guess the question is. Of course, in high school, we pay for it.
You know, there is very little replication in our course offerings and the State College of Florida. Many of our students articulate into programs, and so they have a paramedic to RN program. They have a practical nurse to RN program. And so our students take education, have a skill to go to the workforce, but many of them take that and go directly to the State College of Florida. From a price consideration, we are a clock hour institution and they're a credit hour institution, so making comparisons across institutions is difficult. But to attend SCTI as a full-time student costs us about $3,500. And when you do that as a return on investment for what our students are making when they enter the workforce, it's a pretty good bargain.
Thank you.
Very popular offering are human services. Cosmetology is huge. Information technology, one of the areas that we're working on with the Suncoast Workforce Board, being rebranded as Career Source Florida at the state level. So it'll be Career Source Florida. Suncoast will be our local entity, is looking at alignment in information technology. We had a large study that was conducted here in our market on manufacturing. At the same time, the Hillsborough County did one in the area of IT. And so we're looking at that study because we believe there's lessons to be learned there. There's a skills development committee working through the Workforce Board. I'll start saying Career Source Florida. Through Career Source Florida, that is looking at the alignment because we're hearing that there are vacancies in information technology and our students are not at 100% placement, so we want to make sure that we're arming our students with the skills that they're looking for in the workforce, and if adjustments are needed, that we're making those adjustments. So I expect the response in the area of IT to be very different than our response in the area of manufacturing. In manufacturing, we came to the conclusion that we were not serving that sector, so we sought to develop a program. In IT, we are serving the sector. Now it's an issue of alignment to make sure that our programs lead to the employment opportunities that are here locally. See that most of our law and public safety resides at the post-secondary level. Some of our greatest partnerships reside in this sector with all of our local law enforcement agencies and our fire services. Good. Jump in here if you have questions.
I do. You were talking about jobs at the local level, but we also know that our students move, and Florida is a very migratory state. So do we also look at national openings? So, you know, my generation is a huge bubble generation that will need allied health services as we continue to grow. So I want to make sure that not only are we meeting the needs of the local employers, but we're also meeting the needs of our students from a more global perspective, what's out there nationally and internationally for them.
Certainly. Kind of how those rings goes, we always look first at Sarasota County, make sure we're serving those employers. Then we expand out to a 3-county region that includes Manatee and Charlotte. We also receive data on a statewide basis, and then finally national trends and demand. That's where I think industry certification is so important, is that I'd like to think that a credential from SCTI carries a lot of weight here in Sarasota County, but that would be completely foreign to someone in Georgia or Alabama. And so that's where an ASE certification that is immediately recognizable on a national level.
Great, thank you.
So some things that we've accomplished in the last year that we're proud of. We have changed the way that we compensate our advisors for our career and technical student organizations. We are compensating them for the work that they do. And so if they have monthly meetings with their clubs, if they're traveling to district and state competitions, to make sure that our funding flows to our most active advisors. In the past, that was a flat supplement, and it was not based on the level of activity of the instructor or the individual chapter. We have some great things that are coming up out of Inglewood. They have an incubation center down there where they're doing some innovation. And there's some great things that are happening at Northport High School in the way that they're really bringing those classroom lessons to life and doing prototyping, not just for the sake of completing a project in class, but it will lead to patents and hopefully new sectors developing here. So they're doing lots of work there. So there's great opportunity. We're certainly proud of what's going on at Booker High School and their Law Academy in the last year. We've opened labs at Pineview and McIntosh. Pineview is a particular point of pride. The recognition that CTE belongs in a gifted curriculum really is a great recognition, and we have a principal there that, if you don't know, his father was a career and technical educator. He is a real partner. Have really enjoyed working with him and see some new programs coming into Pineview to make sure that we're graduating a well-rounded student that can go directly to work or any of the country's finest universities. And certainly any conversation about things accomplished in the last year that we're proud of would be incomplete if we didn't talk about our precision machining lab at SCTI. I've gotten some really good press on that, have had lots of good conversations, but also really the lesson learned there. When people say, how did you get that done? And to talk about the way that we interact with our employers, and the real message being that when they lead, that we fall right in line and develop programs that meet their needs. So real excited, not just about the machining lab, but the conversations that surrounded that and how we achieved that. Okay. The chart that you have in front of you shows the industry certification pass rates for Sarasota versus the state, and you'll see that we have grown along with the state to the point that our pass rate on industry certifications now surpasses the state.
Interesting colors.
You like that?
In the long run, I think they may be appropriate.
Trying to keep my tomahawk chopped to myself. One of the things that when I assumed this position last November is we talked about a K-20 program in which we worked with our elementary schools as well as our middle and high schools. But when we sat down with staff and said, well, what are we doing in our elementary schools? It was like crickets. We do some exploratory things, and individual teachers have some great lessons that they've initiated. But there wasn't a lot of initiative coming from our CTE department into the elementary school. And so we did some research. We talked to some instructors, and we made a resource available to them called Pause in Jobland. It is a wonderful resource, and it really begins that conversation that we were talking about, Dr. Todd, is that there are literally hundreds of things you can be when you grow up. Some you're overly familiar with because your mom and dad happens to be a police officer or a school teacher or an accountant, but there's lots of things out there that you're never exposed to. And it gets in there and just talks about what's it like, a day in the life of a veterinary tech, and it gives you an opportunity to explore some of those careers. Many times they read a quick page and say, okay, I don't want to do that, which we consider to be a win. And other times it causes them to ask further questions about, well, how might I go about doing that? And do I really need to be good at math if I do that? Well, yes, you do.
Right. And I think that's just so important, and I'll share my nephew's experience because he was at SCF in the paramedic program, and he took the math courses, the science courses, the liberal arts courses, and he excelled. Then he went to SCTI in the EMT and rode, and after he rode, I think he had 6 rides in the program, and he came to me and he said, Auntie Carol, this is not for me. This is not what I want to do. So it was that personal experience of riding and seeing what he saw when he rode that was so very different from what he learned in the classroom that he made that decision. It wasn't the career for him.
Absolutely. So some things we're looking forward to in the coming year. We've been scheduled by the Florida Department of Education for a program review, so they will be here on site at the end of April. They'll look at every facet of our CTE program at our middle, high school, and at SCTI. They'll look specific to some federal dollars that have been allocated to Sarasota County. But that's an opportunity for us to brag on our programs, but it's also an opportunity to get a pair of outside eyes that come in and have looked at other districts. And so it's not a gotcha in any sense of the imagination, but they come through and there'll be lots of conversations that said, have you ever thought about? And when we say that's something we've not thought about, and they said, well, maybe you ought to go spend some time with the people up in Polk County. They do a really good job in this area. And do you mind if we refer people down to Sarasota in an area that we believe you excel in? So it's a resource from the state, and they come around and look at programs. And so we're excited to have them in and look at our programs, tell us what we're doing well, and maybe point us to some resources that might strengthen our programs. Okay. A big area in the coming year is the tying of individual instructor evaluation to the performance of their students. It's a particular challenge in the area of CTE due to the wide variety of subjects that we teach, so we need to make sure that we have a assessment system that matches that. So that's a major item of work in the coming year.
Is that state mandated?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We're going to spend some time here talking about post-secondary service options down in Northport. Our programs are underway at Northport High School, and a tremendous opportunity to maybe build a technical center in Northport in the coming years. Then I'd like to spend some time with you. We highlighted the technical center bill that will be presented in the 2014 legislative session, and make sure that we are well represented on that front.
Before we move on to the Northport, how are we doing on the other centers that we have here? We've got the SCTI at Proctor and Beneva, and then we've got the Newtown one. Correct. And the one in Venice. How are those classes moving along, or enrollments?
Well, if you go site by site, what we're doing in Newtown is specifically in the area of adult education. Mm-hmm. And so our original goal was to house some jobs programs there, but we were really overwhelmed by the need in adult basic education. If you've not had a chance to visit that site, we're extremely proud of the work that we're doing there, because the lion's share of the work that's being done there is being done through volunteers. There are 2 full-time staff, 3 part-time instructors, and a cadre of 20 or 30 volunteers. And we've reorganized that site. We've taken a classroom and broke it up into 4 different cubbies, in which it's not uncommon to see all of those cubbies being used with a volunteer and 2 students. And it really gets that level of instruction down to where it's very personalized and individualized. And so we have some great volunteers who have connected with those students and are working with them there at Newtown. Venice, we just relocated to the campus of Venice High School. Those programs are very strong. It was a very smooth transition because we had a presence there on Jacaranda, so it was just a matter of continuity of instruction and moving over. We are seeing a return of adult and community enrichment in Venice, which is something that we had not offered on the Jacaranda campus for some time, but with the technology that was put in at Venice during that move, we're seeing a return of adult and community enrichment there, which we're excited about.
What specifically are you seeing there? What classes?
Computer training, and then they've got some of their, I would call them social studies, but the special topics. And so they look to, they're kind of trial balloons, and they've been pleased with the results. So every time that we offer, we'll increase those offerings to make sure we're meeting those needs. Tremendous response to being on the island. So specifically in Northport, last Monday we began classes utilizing the facilities at Northport High School. We've had specifically adult basic education classes. We're going to offer culinary arts, and I've found a place to do the first course in auto mechanics. And so our idea there stems from what we were doing specifically in Newtown, that we found that it was difficult to get students to come to the main campus of SCTI who've not been involved in any type of academic study for a period of time. And so what we found is people want to study in their neighborhood. And so we're bringing the training to them. Once they meet with some success, the question becomes asked, how do I continue my studies? And we can set the hook and say, well, we have that program that continues on the campus of SCTI, and then we arrange visits and continue their enrollment. So what we found is if we can get them some success in their community, that there's then a willingness to explore traveling the distance to the main campus to continue their studies. At the same time, I do think there's an opportunity for us to have a standalone campus in Northport. We've had conversations in regards to what's the need, and I think it's really a case of demographics and geography, that if you look at Sarasota County and you project where we currently have technical centers, that there's a huge gap, which is Northport. And so we have begun a site selection process that is culminating here relatively soon. I believe we'll have a site. So the conversation becomes, now that you have a site in Northport, what's the development timeline in regards to having a technical center there in Northport? So I think there's a tremendous opportunity. Was certainly a major topic of conversation on Friday at Convocation of Governments. And I tell you what I heard loud and clear was sooner rather than later, and a willingness of a variety of partners that's the next place we ought to go, and that we ought to go there as quickly and as efficiently as we can. Also want to highlight a partnership that we have really, as the Executive Director for Career Technical and Adult Education, have tried to educate myself on the Northport area. Have some great partners that have stepped up, and certainly one of those leaders is that Northport EDC has been really a good partner for me in introducing me to some folks and having an understanding of what the opportunities are in Northport. Okay. So as I mentioned, we are well into the site selection process. We've discussed on Friday the potential of co-locating a Sarasota County library. When we talk about a Northport SCTI, I really look at that as an independent technical center. Based on the geography, is that you would want a broad array of courses, and so it's not necessarily complementary to the main campus programs, but there would be some duplication in high demand areas, and there would also be an opportunity to put some specialized programs down there that would set that campus apart. So when you talk about the ability to serve high school students, the ability to serve adults in both career preparation and adult basic education, continuing our work, and adult and community enrichment. And then once you have those programs in place, you have the ability to serve existing workers as they update their skills, which is what we call continuing workforce education.
And given the proximity to Charlotte County, are we looking at what they offer and having those conversations?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
When you look specifically at the career areas that we're looking at, a lot of this comes from if you said you were going to develop a technical center, there are certain programs that belong at every technical center because those sectors exist in most economies. So talk about automotive service technology, business technology, construction, cosmetology, culinary arts. There's some need for dental assisting, so it's a program that we'll be exploring. EMT and paramedic, which falls under the EMS sector, manufacturing, and certainly no technical center would be complete without serving our health sector and nursing programs. So you'll see that when you talk about what are you thinking about in Northport, it really is a scaled down version of our main campus that would have a level of independence because there's not a lot of crossover with that student population. I think that we can serve that population without impacting enrollment at the main campus. Okay. Two major points to consider, the first of which is there are different designations through our accrediting body. And so one of the conversations and items that we've looked at is, would you brand it as a separate technical center where it's Northport Technical Institute, or would it be a branch campus of SCTI? As a branch campus of SCTI, it is immediately accredited and ability to offer financial aid, whereas if you went as an independent campus, you're about 3 years out from gaining that accreditation and being able to offer financial aid. So I think we would open that as a branch campus, and then at some point, if it needed to be branded separately, you could do that. But my advice to you would be, for efficiency of administration, to open it as a branch campus and see where it goes from there. Okay. And the second bullet is certainly a major issue, is that we have the ability, if we had a building today, we could operate programs there. There's always conversations about the construction and the facility side and the operations side. We do have the operational capacity to manage the technical center and to employ instructors, which is certainly an important point. Okay. Questions before we leave Northport?
How long have you been head of career and technical?
About 14 months, early November of...
It just seems like you've been here for a long time and done a lot of things. Thank you for all the work you've done in 14 months.
It's been a lot of fun.
Before we move on, and I don't know if it's a question for you, Dr. Bowden, or for the superintendent, but are we starting to put together some capital dollars, money, or capital, looking at the capital piece of this?
Yes.
Okay, and
that will be a presentation at a future workshop where we'll give you more specifics in the rollout. And we're also doing some exploring in the meantime of some additional revenue streams. So that will also be presented at that time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Not at the end of the day, but at the end of this part of the presentation, I want to just say, what a great job that I think you are doing and have done. I can remember getting presentations on career and technical in the past that were certainly not the same caliber as this presentation. And I have worked with you, maybe fortunately or unfortunately for you, closely, and we've gone out and talked to businesses together and so forth, because I'm always trying to tell our story wherever we can. And it's refreshing and it's a pleasure, and I think you are doing a phenomenal job with whatever the task is at hand, and I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And I concur with my colleagues, and when all is said and done, I'm sure that you are the person that we want leading this ship.
Thank you. Gonna make me blush. Make my cheeks turn garnet. There you go. There are some efforts underway in Tallahassee that I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with, and make sure that I have the support of this board. But technical centers, we've been signaled that they've spent some time working on our middle schools. They've spent some time working on the high schools. And so we were signaled midsummer that technical centers would be an area of work for this legislative session. So we have met with various House and Senate staff in regards to what needs to be done to reposition our technical centers in the state of Florida. A majority of that work is being done through two professional organizations, the first of which is the Florida Association for Career and Technical Education. You can see their mission there, but one of them is to advocate with the legislature and on public policy. We are well represented there. I am a member of the board of directors of FACTI and have participated in the crafting of the legislative platform. And so if you call my office and I'm in Tallahassee, it's not supporting my Seminoles, it's working on this legislative platform, because I really believe it has the potential to transform technical education here in the state of Florida. The other professional organization is a group called the Florida Leadership for Career and Technical Education. It is a sub-association of FLCTE, and it consists of people in positions similar to mine, the CTE directors from all of our 67 school districts, as well as the directors of our technical centers. So it's the leadership division within FACTI, and for the current year, I'm the president of that group. So as I said, we're well represented on this front. I just wanted to spend a couple minutes going through who the technical centers are, because, some people say it's a compliment, but what you never want to be in education is the best kept secret. And so it's kind of a compliment and a challenge at the same time to raise the platform. But when you look at who the technical centers are, and part of it is, educating not only in local communities and school boards, but elected officials and very much so legislative staff in Tallahassee. But there are currently 48 institutions that are similar to SCTI in the state. Very much have the same relationship with their local economy that we do. They interact with them and are free to develop programs that meet the local needs. There's not a lot of centralization. As an example, when we decided that we wanted to serve the manufacturing setting, there was no state filing or permission that needed to take place. We do feasibility on the local level. We do some filing with our local accrediting bodies, but those are typically independent decisions that take place at the Technical Institute and with their local boards. Kind of the guiding principles of our technical centers is that we, in all cases, want to be market driven. We want to respond to business and industry. We've talked a little bit today about the cost effectiveness for both the student and the state, and we want to be focused on results. In our most recent filing with the Council on Occupational Education, we had an 89.7% placement rate. And when you talk about what our goal is and our sole focus at a technical institute, it is placing our students in employment. And near 90% of our students are working in their chosen fields after completing study. In the next year, you're going to see the technical institutes start to work together on a joint marketing platform. Is that we do a lot to connect with our community here in SCTI, and directly to our north, MTI has some marketing efforts, but very rarely do we work together just to reposition the technical institutes themselves. And so we've decided on a tagline of a career in a year, because that's what we do. In 1 year of full-time academic study, we can have you working. And so you're going to see some joint marketing efforts under the tagline, a career in a year. So the platform itself, and I've received some feedback that these are not necessarily in the order of their ability to transform, but these are the 7 things that we are seeking in a transformation. Number 1 is the development of a statewide student information system, the way that we report results. In lots of occasions, when a technical institute reports data through a district IT function, that there's different data elements for post-secondary than there is for secondary. And so what you have is here locally, we have a $1 million investment in Sonus, whereas in Orange County, they have a multi-million-dollar investment in Student Desk. And what we found is that we are all seeking a data solution. When you talk to different technical center directors, you get different feelings about their data systems. I said that politically correct. There's not a high level of satisfaction in regards to those independent systems that manage student information at the technical center. Certainly at SCTI, we'd like to be a lot more interactive with our students. As an example, if you enrolled in a course at the University of South Florida, you can do that process completely online. You cannot enroll in a class at SCTI because we don't take credit cards over the internet. We don't do online registration because we don't have that student information system. So a decision has to be made whether we want to reinvest in our student information system or whether the technical centers would be best served to come together and to share that development cost and move forward. Put the technical back in technical center. Okay. State funding model, we just want to make sure that our funding model evolves as we evolve as a system. There is a committee that advises the Department of Education on the formula that is used to distribute funds, and we just want to reinforce the mission of that group and the results that come out of that.
And you'll remind this board member and our audience how the capital dollars are that we receive from Tallahassee to support our technical institute and our new one that's coming in Northport?
We do not have a state funding source for capital, and so when other directors ask how do you get an SCTI rebuilt at the intersection of Beneva and Proctor, you tell them that that is a competing project. And so we have a new SCTI at Beneva and Proctor because of the leadership of this board and because of the value that they place on technical education. Unfortunately, that is not uniform across the state, and so those are just difficult decisions that have to be made about do we build elementary, middle, high schools, do we renovate, do we change air handlers, and when is it that the technical center rises to the top of that list. We are very, very fortunate here in Sarasota County to have the facilities that we have, but those are born entirely here on a local level, whereas other institutions of our type receive money from the state.
And I just think it's important for our public to know that we do not receive those capital dollars, whether it's for what we do in North Sarasota, Beneva and Proctor, Venice, or in the future Northport, but we do not receive any capital dollars.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Our programs are very affordable at the post-secondary level. There has been some conversation about the financial aid fee. We have a base tuition, and on top of that tuition, we charge a financial aid fee, and so we're going to seek some flexibility in that financial aid fee in the way that it's assessed, but not to change the cap. So it would not be a fee increase, but just kind of a movement around between a technology fee and a capital fee that is charged of our students that's minimal at best.
Do we offer online classes?
We do.
Am I ahead of?
You are. The next
so
slide,
sorry.
we'll talk about that, is we are hampered in our ability to offer online classes as a clock hour institution and the record-keeping responsibilities that are thrust on us, not from the state, but from the U.S. Department of Education if we are a financial aid granting institution. The state has 9 targeted areas, and so that list was given to us in the last legislative session. To the practitioners in the field, the list seemed a bit arbitrary in regards to where these areas came from. It was not based on local data, and so what we've asked is certainly the legislature wants to play a hand in guiding the technical institutes towards areas that they feel need attention and to be targeted. But we feel on the local level there's sectors that need our attention, and there's a fund for targeted sectors that we want to make sure that when we're growing our programs based on what we're hearing here locally that we have that flexibility. Okay, so clock hour to credit hour conversion. We are a clock hour institution, and so when a student gains financial aid at our institution, we must account for their time in class in 15-minute increments. And so absolutely true. So we have to account for that, and we pay them based on percentage of completion of a program. And so if it's a 900-hour program, we track in 15-minute increments their attendance in class. And that is based solely on seat time, not mastery of objectives.
And whose bureaucracy is this?
This comes through the U.S. Department of Education, their guidelines.
Dear.
Now, if you're a credit hour institution, they track completion of courses. So if you had a 3 credit hour course, if you complete the class, you get all 3 credit hours. On a clock hour institution, if you complete a 150-hour course, but you miss 45 minutes along the way, we have to recalculate your payments manually, which is a burden on us administratively. We, at the local level, last year distributed about $400,000 in federal financial aid dollars, and our compliance costs were about $100,000.
So how can we change?
By moving to a credit hour system that relieves that burden to track those 15 minutes.
How do we do that?
It's in our legislative platform. That
So
is
we as SCTI can't do that.
We do not have that flexibility today.
But the state can change that?
The state can change that.
Just the state? We don't need something from the federal government to do that? Okay.
File with them, but the way that we're set up in Tallahassee. Now, where the challenge comes is, as you mentioned, there are tremendous opportunities in online education. Mm-hmm. And it is difficult to track 15-minute increments with an online student. And so you see very few online offerings coming out of clock hour institutions. In a credit hour institution, when you master a course, you receive that credit. In a clock hour institution, we say it's 150 hours of content. Some people will master that content in 100 hours. Others will master it in 200 hours.
But that can be tracked. I mean, I teach at two universities using two different LMSs, and so you can track the time that the students spend in the LMS, in the course, as well as the number of times that they enter and exit. Yep. So, I just think we need to get this taken care of ASAP.
Yep. But the example there is a 150-hour course. We assess fees at 150 hours. If you master the content, you progress through the online content in 100 hours, your reward is you have to go out of pocket for that additional 50 hours because I've charged you $150 in fees, but I can only reimburse you for the 100 hours of study.
So we need to get it changed. It's just
so
as simple as that.
Yes. And so, yes, ma'am.
I am really glad to hear about this legislative platform that you have. And I'm glad that you're on the board of directors. I'm a little floored, though, that, we're hearing about it now, not from you, but my gosh, we've been on FSBA, we've got these consortiums, and these things haven't crossed our path. I mean, we even set our legislative agenda for the school board earlier. I mean, I would think some of these things we should have included in our presentation to the legislative delegation, or were you there also?
No, ma'am.
Ooh, yeah, we need to include you into the legislative delegation meetings because, we're in a position now where our legislative delegation can really help get something through. But perhaps one of those times when you're up there, you can look up Wayne Blanton and find out which states, which counties overlap, because my gosh, something as simple as this, the FSBA should be, the Fuller School Boards Association should be pushing too. These things need to be on our radar as school board members, and perhaps maybe they can even, put you on our when we have our meetings so that we can hear what you guys are up to, because it just floors me that this is the first time I'm hearing of this. And I guess thank you for being there and for bringing it to our attention. But this seems like something that should really be fixed, and I think every school board member in the state should be pushing every legislator in the state to correct this, because there's nobody that wants to spend 25% on costs.
It's incredible.
So what I'm hearing is ultimately when we do the clock to credit hour conversion, that it's not going to be an additional cost.
It will decrease our administrative costs.
Decrease the administrative costs.
Increase access for students.
Which would increase then our FTE and our operating dollars.
Yes, ma'am.
When all is said and done.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. In regards to partners, just to follow up on your point, Ms. Brown, we have received an endorsement from the Superintendents, State Superintendents Association, and the Florida Association of School Administrators has reviewed the platform. I don't know where the School Board Association is, but if someone's willing to make an introduction, I'm more than willing to follow up.
And I know some of us will be up there March 19th and 20th, and the 20th is the day we're going to be meeting with our legislators. And if you're up there or you're planning on being there, let us know. Keep in touch with us so that maybe we can, you can help explain this to
Sure.
our delegation when we go there. Thank you.
Todd, did you say though that was from the federal government?
Well, these are state changes that will affect the way we interact with federal government, but this would all be changes at the state level. There is a level of degree in the educational spectrum called the Applied Associate's degree. There are currently 9 Applied Associate's degrees, and they are used to varying degrees by our local state college and community colleges. Currently, we are not authorized to issue an Applied Associate degree. And one of the things that we're asking that when we move to credit hour is that we be allowed to issue an Applied Associate's degree, and that those credits be fully transferable to the state colleges so that they could then go to the state college, take additional academic requirements, and have those as associate degrees, which would be transferable.
And doing so, would that not require another level of SACS accreditation?
No, ma'am.
No?
Our current accreditation with the Council on Occupational Education grants us SACS accreditation at this level.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
The last item is a technical college name change. We really feel like the repositioning of technical centers would be incomplete without a change to the name. Just the way that they are perceived in getting doors open with guidance counselors and parents and potential students. Students continually talked about college, 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 college. Directly to our north in Georgia, they are 5 years into rebranding their technical centers to technical colleges, and in the first year they had a 30% jump in enrollment that they have sustained since then. Just the way the institution is perceived. I tell people a bit flippantly, everyone wants their baby to go to college, not to be institutionalized. Sure. Just the difference between a technical college and a technical institute when people look at the educational options available to them. One of the questions that immediately comes up when you talk about technical colleges is, can we be a technical college and have me be the executive director and report through the superintendent to this board? And absolutely it can. There is no requirement that it's an independent board. There is some misinformation around the name technical college that necessitates an independent board, and that is absolutely not true. There would be no change in governance structure, and we are currently accredited to be a technical college. The Council on Occupational Education accredits like institutions, and it is one of the names that is authorized. So there would be no change to governance, and there would be no change to accreditation.
So should this be accepted, the name change and the awarding of the AAS degree, then would you be able to accept the Florida prepaid?
Yes.
Excellent.
Wow.
Excellent. Because that is, we have many parents that we know who bought into the Florida prepaid. So with the ability to accept that, that's just wonderful. So this has my vote. You're promoted. Thank you.
Speaking of promoted, would you go from executive director to dean then, or?
That's one of the standing jokes that would probably make Lori a president and me a provost or something like that. But those are just germane titles, that there is no requirement in any enabling legislation or accreditation that you have a president or provost. So I believe it would be status quo in that regard.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, if you get this passed, you can write just let me know what you want me to call you, and I'll and we'll fill in the blank, whatever.
Sounds good. We've got you on record there. And any presentation would be incomplete if I didn't thank you for advocating and the introductions that you've made and the support that you've given me over the last 14 months. Workforce development is really where it's at. I think I have the best job in this district. My apologies to the superintendent, but I'll take my job over hers every day of the week. And sometimes you just wake up in the morning and feel like you're doing the right things, working with the right people in the right place. And that's how I feel every morning that I get up and go to work. So I thank you for the opportunity to serve you in that capacity.
Mr. Kovac.
And Todd, I want to thank you for everything you've done and you continue to do. And this hasn't all happened in 14 months, but I have to say I'm extremely excited about where CTE's positioned throughout the district. You know, you go back a dozen years and, you know, it was the ugly stepchild of education. And, you know, you go back to Bill Delp's days and Gary Norris had a hand in it. Of course, so did Melissa. But, you know, you fast forward to today and where we have CTE classes at Pineview. Who'd ever thunk something like that would have ever happened? So, but I want to say I'm really excited and pleased to where we are and carry on.
Well, they can put technical college on the marquee, but I still have a feeling a lot of people will call us VOTEC, and I'm okay with that.
Well, you're doing good things, and about jobs is where it is for all these families. And you know, I grew up with a degree in VOTEC, if you will, and a college prep from the same high school. Came from a family with not a lot of means, and I worked my way through college, and it certainly didn't hurt me, and I would have never been able to do that had I not had those courses. And I think that's what we're looking at is incremental steps of making people successful and giving them flexibility and options. It's great to have that career choice and have a career and then work through college if, in fact, that's what students want to do. We're finding that we have students at SCTI and then they graduate, and then we don't have the age student until they're about 24, 25, and they're coming back to us because they weren't successful in college or whatever, and now they need to go and get a job that they can make a living at. So be nice if we can transition some of those students right from high school right through career and technical education. So thank you very much for this presentation, and thanks for your help.
Excellent. Thank you. And I have to tell you, I'm just most excited about Northport. Ultimately, we've talked about Northport ever since I've been on the board, Mr. Kovac, ever since you've been on the board, and they felt like the stepchild also. And to be able to offer those programs is, when all is said and done, it's really going to meet their needs. Thank you.
Moving right along.
Mr. Widener is here, and Mitzi Corcoran. Mr. Widener is going to give you an update on the preliminary 14-15 budget, which always includes where we're at with our current budget. Mr. Widener.
Good afternoon, board members. What I'll start out with is what assumptions I've made in coming up with the 14-15 budget. And then also, because actually the governor has not presented his budget yet, but I expect that out very, very soon. We do have the legislative budget request that went in from the Commissioner of Education. That had about a 2% increase in it. But from everything I'm hearing, in my projections, I'm putting in a state increase of about 4% into education. Our tax roll, as you know, is increasing. I have projected that to go up 5%, and that's very similar to what it went up this year. I'm really anticipating hopefully it'll be a little bit more than that. Of course, in my projection for 14-15, I'm projecting that our voted millage will be successful on March 25th, so I have that carrying forward at its current rate. I have looked at our enrollment increases. As far as our own district schools, pretty flat, a little bit of decrease, only about 80 students. Charters right now, I have them projected to go about 600, but at this time of the year, they always project for the max to fill their facilities, so I don't expect when the day is done that will actually go up 600 students. I have projected in the appropriations that our group health would take a mid-year increase of January 1st of about 10%, which would be 5% for the full year. Also in the cafeteria plan, have that going up about 4%, and that would be a mid-year increase or total increase for the year of 2%. The as far as property insurance, have that going up 4%. Gasoline and diesel prices increasing 5%. And then there are some increases that, because we'll be receiving more money in the instructional material area for textbooks and so forth, that would be a pass-through. So then I've increased the amount we'd spend on textbooks, because that's a state categorical that has to be spent in that area. And with those assumptions made, those major, the other thing is the hiring freeze would stay in the way it's been. There would be no salary increase that I have in this preliminary budget, so your salaries would stay pretty much, would stay the same. So when applying all these different assumptions, we get a pretty much break even, actually a little bit to the good for 14-15. So that's just a brief overview, because I'll be going over in detail the different line items. What I'm going to do first is go over this current year we're in, projecting based on operations through December 31st, 2013, and projecting where I think we'll come in at the end of the year of June 30th, 2014. So when we get that, the other thing I'll mention to you also is today at your regular board meeting, the November superintendent's report will be on there. This is all based upon December. So what you have on the November superintendent's report doesn't have any over collections estimated based on, because we've started to receive our property taxes now. So the November report, because it is required we do it monthly, is not showing results of operations as favorable as this December report is. So I just wanted to mention that to you if you were looking at, as you get into your regular board meeting this afternoon, that you'll see different numbers. So getting into the first table here on page 1, as far as your revenues are concerned, you can see the net decrease in revenue is only $40,000. However, there's a large swing in state and local. Our state revenues decreased based upon the third receipt of the third calculation of Florida Education Finance Program. At this point in time, we're analyzing that, and we feel that we will be making corrections that will recover some of the lost money in the third calculation. What happened was, because we mentioned this earlier, because the state went to a new method where you get one FTE per student, no matter if the student's in virtual school or another dual enrollment or whatever, they redid the way in which FTE goes up to the state. We did not get until December 16th our first state run of the new FTE. And then we basically, we received on December 20th the third calculation. However, we then went on break, and so the first week in January was when I really got in there to see what was causing the changes. And it was a loss in weighted FTE. And the two main areas that we lost FTE in was in international baccalaureate test data that was sent up. And that we found was an error, and we're actually correcting and sending that up to the state now. The other area was within the ESE area, the Program 254 area. ESE instituted a new internal software system that helps the liaisons prepare the ESE matrix. And right now the feeling is that that software system brought down the matrix level, and a lot of students that should be categorized as the 254, which is a weight factor of approximately 3.6, are not in there. So that is going on right now with the ESC liaisons going through their student populations to see how much we're going to make a correction on in that. So
we can recoup those dollars.
yes, we have 6 months to make the corrections. And of course, unfortunately,
Does that mean they'll accept the corrections? Or will this be a conversation that we have with them?
I believe they would accept the corrections. The first thing that came out to me big time was we're normally pretty much on our FTE projection by program, and this time we were significantly below the 254 program, and you could see within programs, they call it ESC of basic services, we were up. And when you just look at our trends, it suggests that, yes, we have a reporting problem there. So I really, right now, at this point in time, do not anticipate the state throwing anything back on us about this correction.
Thank you.
When they make the correction, will they backdate it so that we recoup the dollars that we lost this time, or will it just be from that day forward?
What happens is there will then be a fourth calculation, and that fourth calculation is in May, and that'll take into consideration corrections we're sending now, and it'll take into factor in the February count. That is the second week in February. So then they'll recalculate again, and right now I'm anticipating that we will recover a portion of these funds. Now, in my projection right now, I don't have in there projecting that we would recover the funds. So this would be an additional plus as we get closer to the June 30th, 2014.
And how much money are we talking about in that recalculation or that recouping?
I would believe right now we'd be talking somewhere in excess of $1 million. So, but again, we'll have to see how all that is going on because that is happening right now. Okay, moving into, so that's a brief about the revenues. Now the local revenues, you can see I have them going up 1.6 million. The bulk of that is looking at the collections we received in December and factoring in the percent we've received as of December this year to December of last year, and then projecting what that would be as far as local revenues. So again, from your revenue standpoint, we're pretty much even with what the original budget was. In your appropriation area, salaries, 1.5 million to the good. A portion of this is definitely from the hiring freeze. Another portion of it is when the state gave us the extra money that they said was for teacher raises, the whole amount was placed into the budget line item of salaries, even though a portion of that money actually has to go for retirement and Social Security. So that's why you see employee benefits right below it increased somewhat, because the money for those salary benefits was actually up in the salary line. So going on to page 2, as far as, again, looking at our 2013-14 original budget compared to what we're projecting things to come in at, most line items are pretty close. Purchase services just going up a minor $35,000. That's mainly due to the charter school payments. Energy services, that's where your diesel, electric, natural gas goes through. It looks like we're going to have a savings within the electric and natural gas area of about $122,000. Materials and supplies. In how I budget for that, I budget based on what I believe the schools will spend. Right now, based upon through December 31st, 2013, it looks like they'll spend a little bit more than what I projected. just 99, about 100,000. Capital outlay. Right now, the schools are using less of their capital outlay portion of their funds, so I believe that'll come in 693,000 less. And then other expenses, about 128,000 less, and that's mainly dues and fees related to instructional materials. So your net decrease in appropriations for this current year we're in, estimating to be 1.9 million below. And so in the bottom table, I put what the original budgeted fund balance was, which was 44,253,778, less the small decrease in estimated revenues. You add the decrease in appropriations. Also, we paid off the racetrack revenue bonds. This was something we did 20 years ago. There was a balance in that debt service account, which now gets transferred into the general fund. So that I'm reflecting that being transferred in the general fund. So giving you an estimated ending gross fund balance of 47 million. And as far as your unassigned fund balance, be 36,604,000 is the projection, which is 9.43%. So original budget was closer, to the bottom estimate of our fund balance policy, but you can see we're now estimating we'll be coming up close to the upper portion of 10%.
That's what I like about you. As we go forward, that number goes up. I know in some counties that fund balance keeps going down because they keep finding some expenses they didn't put in. But I'm glad you're very conservative up front and can surprise us later on.
The tradition's been there, and of course, I'm in my 32nd year now of doing this, so it was no. Sometimes I don't even surprise myself anymore. But anyway, okay, getting on to page 3 is your preliminary budget for 14-15, based upon those assumptions I went through earlier. And what I've done here is I've projected increase or decrease from what we're estimating our projected actual results of operations will be for 13-14. So federal direct, very small increase. Basically, it's Medicaid funds and ROTC, just 93,000. I did say that I calculated a 4% increase in state funding. However, with the way the Florida Education Finance Program works, because our tax roll is large, and the way they fund the total Florida Education Finance Program, our state portion would actually go down a little bit, and what would happen is the local revenues would come up because the required local effort millage would get adjusted. And of course, it also reflects the 5% tax roll increase. So the bulk of the $13 million increase would really be coming through local revenues. And again, that's because of the way the Florida Education Finance Program works. In the area of appropriations, salaries going down just a very, very small amount, basically 3 teachers because of 80 students less. Employee benefits going up because, again, the group health insurance increase and the cafeteria plan increase that I mentioned. Your purchase services, this is where it's just a flow through of funds from what we get in revenues to the charters. And with the charters right now projected to be higher student enrollment than what they have this year, those purchase service amounts would go up $3.3 million. Energy services, with a 5% price increase in diesel and gasoline, would be going up to $137,000. Materials and supplies, the bulk of that $131,000 is basically the amount we'd get additional for textbooks that we put in the textbook line item. And I've put no changes in the capital outlay and other expenses. So your total appropriation increase for 14-15 would be $4.9 million, or almost $5 million. Then on page,
Before you move on,
Sure.
question probably for a superintendent. Can we buy electronic books with our textbook money?
Yes, we can,
Perfect, thank
and
you.
are required to do so.
Oh, thank you.
then on page 4, what I've done, I've given you a summary of the total revenues and transfers in and the whole. So estimated revenues for 14-15 would be at $373,184,220. Estimated transfers in from capital, the $20,788,000. So you have total revenues and transfers in of $393,972,000. Less your estimated appropriations of $393,019,966. And this is the first time since 07-08 that we basically have just about a balanced, or do have a balanced budget.
Can you say that again? I called Al last Friday. I said, Al, either I've forgotten, either you've made a really big mistake or I've forgotten how to read a budget, because this appears to be having a budget surplus, and I just haven't seen that in so long. It was just really hard to believe. I know there's a whole lot of things going to happen between then and or between now and next year, but the first time we've been presented with a balanced budget in years. So,
And I must admit, Mr. Kovacs really caught me off guard because he was so serious. Because I immediately got everything back in front of me and said, "Oh my Lord, what did I do?" And because of the way he called me on it, and then I understood the the conversation. So it made me feel good when we were done.
Well, Al, I'm just glad that after all these years you finally listened to what Mr. Kovacs requested and balanced our budget.
Now, and I must say though that this is based on the one big unknown is what the governor and legislature will do, and if they take the increase and they earmark it for specific things, then that would change this completely. But right now, when I look at other school districts across the state, and I see the financial condition that many of them are in, school districts need to not have the additional funds earmarked for specific purposes. The local board, the local community needs to have those funds to meet their programs and things that they need to do. So I'm hopeful that that is what will in fact happen at the end of the session. That'll be in May.
I just, as we talk about the balanced budget, I just have to remind our public that every year that we come in with savings, and that every year that our budget at the end of the year, we have a higher percentage in our reserve than we had anticipated. So, we do really well.
And that's not
do
by
really
accident.
well.
That's because of the hard work of our CFO and our finance department, which, I think has always been right at the top.
Exactly. And our superintendent and our staff, and our superintendent works very hard with our staff, and recommendations that come to us, and we accept those recommendations, and we have, heated discussions sometimes. But I think our staff, including our CFO, and I don't want to discount, what Ms. Cochran and Mr. Widener do, because they do an excellent job with our budget. But our staff, they know how to they know how to save, they know how to squeeze those dollars, and I think that we need to compliment everyone in this district, because we do. While we have this balanced budget, we always have a reserve fund higher than what we expected to have.
And I appreciate those comments, Dr. Todd, because it truly is staff looking for additional savings, not requiring that we fill positions as quickly as they'd like to, so you don't always have an overlap. I mean, there's so many ways our staffs make sacrifices trying to prioritize what the greatest needs are, but be very, very conservative at all times. And that is a culture that, even with the gratifying news that is presented here, that we have to maintain. It is all about efficiencies, looking very conservatively, and having always that framework of getting as much savings as possible throughout the year that I think will continue to serve this district well in the future. What we will all love to see go away are those horrendous budget cuts at the end of the year. And if we can work in a culture that allows us to sustain a quality school district and not have to go through that every year, I think we will all celebrate.
And I as a board member, appreciate that because they make us look good. The hard work that they do, we look good because of their hard work, and I appreciate it.
And looking around at other districts in the state of similar size, many of them do not have reserves at this point in time. Very, very low reserves, I'll put it that way, or none. And I know that the state says 3%, but many of them are really having a very hard time, and will continue to for the future, I'm afraid. But that is a wonderful thing to know that we are able to meet the requirements of so many things having such a categorical place. And if we look at the almost $17 million that we received in addition to last year, all but $1 million of that already had some categorical that had to go to. And when we went around and talked to the legislative delegation, Mrs. White and myself in the fall, we made sure that we pointed that out because some of them didn't really realize that.
The detailed pages are attached, and I would like to highlight a couple things on the detailed pages. So if you go to page 5, because I was here for the presentation on workforce development, and if you go down to the bottom of this where it says composition of ending gross fund balance, and then within there, if you go down to the 4th line, it says assigned for workforce development, and you can see in 11-12 it was $4.5 million, in 12-13 $6.8 million. We're projecting this year at $5.7 million, and then in 14-15 $5.5 million. When in your presentation by Dr. Bowden, he indicated that he had ample funds for the operations of Northport. Well, that's where that money is. It's sitting right there, and you can see that it is a very healthy balance in the workforce development, and that money by law can only be used for adult programs. And each year I have to go through and do a reconciliation that shows where they do fund some areas that we're charging the staff in the correct areas on that. The other thing I'd like to, again, based on the prior, if you go to page 6, under the state, you'll see your workforce development revenues per year. And you can see in 11-12, the workforce development was $9.6 million, then $9.3. This year took a little over $1 million dip. What has happened is they came up with a funding formula for workforce development system. They call it WITIS. Anyway, they never really could fund it when they did this many years ago. So they just looked at how much they were funding and more or less level funded it with maybe some cost of living, not really looking at the number of hours being reported for students. And one reason it took a little bit of a dip this year is they did begin looking at how many hours were being reported and they had made an adjustment. So I just call that to your attention since you just had a presentation on workforce development. And it is an area that definitely from the revenue area, in my opinion, definitely needs some work in it and done on it because they came up with a funding, 10, 15 years ago, I forget how long it is now, could never fund it. And then, because it always used to be FTE funded. And then they made that change and realized they couldn't fund the level they thought they should fund. And other than that, the rest is just all the, one thing I will go, page 7, if you want to flip to that very briefly. On page 7 is the number of positions that the general fund is funding. And I just wanted to highlight that when you look at actual 12-13 filled, and it's like 4,312, and a comparable number would be going to the 13-14 filled, and you can see it's 4,398. And that would be an apples and apples because I don't have budget on the other ones. But the main reason your filled positions now are higher in the general fund is we had some, with the federal funding, sequestration and so forth, we've actually had some positions that were funded in the federal fund that are now over in the general fund. So it's not like we've added staff because when you look at our total numbers, we're been going down. But I just wanted to highlight that since I did this presentation that because Title II was funding some positions that were at schools, and it does not do that any longer. And then within the IDEA, which is your individuals' disabilities federal money, some of those aids could no longer be funded in the federal fund, and now are over in the general fund. So just wanted to highlight that too.
Will that change with this budget that passed, where they got rid of some of the sequestration for cuts, or you don't know yet?
I really don't know. I do feel better from what I saw from the federal side. It looks like maybe we might have some level or not, as because they were originally indicating for everything stayed the same. Look for your federal funding to go down about 7%. So I don't believe that'll be the case now. And but again, we'll have to watch that as all that data comes out.
The other question I have is the FEFP on the state. You're projecting a on the state side, $12.5 million negative from the state on the FEFP. Are they not doing that 90-10 split anymore, or are they recalculating how they do that, or what?
Well, they're doing the 90-10. However, for example, the teacher raise money, which is a new categorical this past year, which I'm projecting will continue. Your transportation funds, your state categorical, as far as your instructional materials, they're considered state funding, and they're in the state portion. So because the local is funding a portion of your transportation, the teacher raise money, instruction materials, to balance the state money to what it will come in at, you have to put in that $12 million decrease because the money's actually coming from your required local effort. I know when they first did this, 4 or 5 years ago, when all of a sudden they rolled the categoricals into the FEFP per se, one of the flags that immediately I asked Department of Education was, well, how am I going to send up a budget? Because when you want to see Florida Education Finance Program revenues, they're not going to equal because I've got to put what my local tax collections are. And so they now have some of these categoricals don't go in the state portion as they used to before. So anyway, but just I know it's rather complicated, and it was because the state, of course, has been having funding issues also, and whoever came up with that idea, it really saved the state a lot of money per se.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I just had a quick question because you were talking, or you mentioned you're expecting them to fund the teacher raises, or to continue to have our local taxpayers fund the teacher pays. But you're talking about going backwards, and in other words, putting the same amount of money in for 14-15 that they put in for 13-14. I haven't heard anything. I'm assuming there hasn't been any discussion about doing that again.
Yeah, the discussion I have heard is they're going to continue it,
but not do anything for 14-15 for pay raises. Just
right.
Fund what they fund,
right? Fund
or have us fund what we funded this year.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, we'll have to, normally the governor's budget is out by now, so we'll have to wait and see what that has in it. And once I get that document, then I'll be making further updates. But I knew that being we were midway through January, I normally, a lot of times even before this, have given you a preliminary budget for the next year. So I decided to go forth and give you my assumptions and at least begin so we can begin some planning. And that's the end of my presentation, unless you have any other questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And this ends the televised portion of our workshop.